Can we really predict the future? Not just next year, not even the next decade, but the next 100 years? What if I told you that the United States' reign as a superpower is far from over? That a war with Mexico is inevitable? That Poland will emerge as Europe's next great empire? And that by 2100, the world's dominant power won't be China, Russia, or even America, but a country nobody's talking about today. This isn't a fantasy. This is George Friedman's The Next 100 Years, a jaw-dropping, hyperlogical forecast by the geopolitical mastermind behind Stratfor, the private intelligence firm known as the Shadow CIA. Friedman doesn't rely on crystal balls or vague speculation. He follows the irresistible forces that have shaped history for centuries: geography, demography, and the relentless hunger for power. Forget everything you think you know. The 21st century won't belong to China. It won't be a multipolar world. And the next global war won't be fought over oil or ideology. But something much bigger. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the US is structurally unstoppable, and why China's rise is a myth. The real reason Europe is doomed to fail. The coming space war that will redefine power forever. The dark horse nation that will dominate the 22nd century. This isn't just a book, it's a blueprint for the future. And once you see the world through Friedman's eyes, you'll never look at politics, war, or power the same way again. The countdown to 2100 starts now. Don't blink, or you'll miss what's coming. We are going to explore the book, chapter by chapter. Chapter 1, The World in 2009, The Dawn of a New Era. 2009, the world stands at a crossroads. America is bruised, wars in the Middle East, an economic meltdown, and whispers of decline. China is rising. Russia is flexing its muscles. Europe dreams of unity. But beneath the chaos, one truth remains: the United States isn't just a superpower, it's the only superpower. And contrary to what the doomsayers believe, its reign is just beginning. The myth of American decline. George Friedman doesn't buy the hype. While pundits predicted America's downfall after Iraq and the 2008 crash, the data tells a different story. Unrivaled military, no nation can project power like the US Navy controls the seas, and its air dominance is untouchable. Economic engine, even after the recession, the US economy dwarfs rivals, and its tech boom is just starting. Geographic luck, oceans east and west, weak neighbors north and south. No existential threats, unlike every other great power in history. Decline? No. The 21st century is America's to lose. Geography is destiny. Friedman's core argument: nations don't choose their fate, their land does. Russia? Trapped in a frozen prison, desperate for warm water ports. China? A coastal giant with enemies at every border. Europe? Doomed by internal divisions and no unified military. But America? A fortress continent, rich in resources, impossible to invade. This isn't prophecy, it's physics. Friedman doesn't predict the future, he reverse engineers it. By studying geography, where are the choke points? The fertile lands. Demographics, who's growing? Who's aging? History's patterns, empires rise and fall by the same rules. The next century isn't a mystery. It's an equation. And America is the constant. Chapter 2, The First Conflict, Russia's Return. At the start of the 21st century, the West dismissed Russia as a spent force, a crumbling relic of the Soviet era, dependent on energy exports and plagued by corruption. But George Friedman saw a different reality, a wounded great power, driven by geography and history to reassert itself, no matter the cost. Russia's actions are not random aggression, they are the inevitable result of its geopolitical predicament. With no natural barriers to protect its heartland, Russia has always relied on expansion to survive. From Napoleon to Hitler, invaders have marched across the North European plain straight toward Moscow. To avoid being crushed again, Russia must push outward, creating buffer states to keep threats at bay. This is why Ukraine matters, not for ideology or resources, but because losing it would leave Russia defenseless. Friedman predicted that by the 2020s, Russia would lash out, triggering a crisis in Eastern Europe. The goal wouldn't be conquest but disruption, shattering NATO's unity and reasserting dominance over its near abroad. And just as he foresaw, the 2022 invasion of Ukraine proved his point. But this war, Friedman argued, would not end in Russian victory. Instead, overextension, economic strain, and internal fractures would lead to another collapse by the mid-2020s. Out of this chaos, new powers would rise. Poland, long seen as a secondary player, would emerge as the backbone of Eastern Europe, militarized, economically robust, and backed by the US. Turkey, straddling Europe and Asia, would leverage its strategic position to become a neo-Ottoman power, playing both East and West. Meanwhile, Russia, exhausted and broken, would fade into irrelevance, not because it lost a war, but because its very geography makes sustained power impossible. Friedman's forecast was met with skepticism when The Next 100 Years was published in 2009. Yet the events of the past decade have followed his script with eerie precision. The question is no longer whether his predictions hold weight, it's what happens next. If Russia's decline is inevitable, who truly benefits? The answer lies in the unexpected nations poised to reshape the century. Chapter 3: The New Power Centers. Conventional wisdom tells us the 21st century will be dominated by familiar giants, the United States, China, and perhaps a united Europe. But George Friedman's analysis reveals a startling truth. The real power players of the coming decades will be nations most observers overlook today. Japan stands poised for an unexpected resurgence. After decades of economic stagnation and pacifism, demographic realities and China's aggression will force Japan to rearm dramatically. By mid-century, Japan will transform into a military-technological powerhouse, developing advanced robotics, space capabilities, and next-generation weapons systems. This rebirth won't mirror its imperial past, but rather create a new kind of digital-age samurai state. Turkey emerges as the pivotal swing power between Europe and Asia. With Russia weakened and the Middle East in flux, Ankara will reactivate its Ottoman-era sphere of influence. Controlling the Bosporus Strait and commanding the eastern Mediterranean, Turkey will become the gatekeeper between continents, neither fully Western nor Eastern, but essential to both. The most surprising rise will be Poland's. As Germany fades due to demographic collapse and EU dysfunction, Poland, with its growing population, strategic location, and historical resilience, will become the nucleus of a new Eastern European bloc. Warsaw's alliance with Washington will make it America's primary continental partner, a role Germany once aspired to hold. Meanwhile, the supposed inevitable powers face stagnation. China's demographic time bomb and geographic constraints will prevent true global dominance. Europe's lack of strategic unity and aging population will relegate it to secondary status. Even America's rivals will inadvertently strengthen its position by forcing technological innovation and reinforcing the dollar's safe haven status. These emerging powers won't challenge American supremacy, but rather operate within a system where Washington remains the ultimate arbiter. Their rise reflects not American weakness, but the natural fragmentation of potential competitors. The 21st century's great geopolitical irony may be that America's dominance persists precisely because no single challenger ever emerges to replace it, only a constellation of regional powers, each with their own limitations. This realignment sets the stage for an even more dramatic development, the world's first true space-age conflict, where the rules of power projection will be rewritten entirely. Chapter 4: The War of the 2080s. The greatest conflict of the 21st century will not be fought over territory, ideology, or resources, but for control of the ultimate high ground, space. By the 2080s, Friedman predicts a global war erupting between the United States and an unlikely alliance of Japan and Turkey, with the battlefield extending from Earth's orbit to the lunar surface. The roots of this conflict lie in the shifting balance of power. Japan, having transformed into a technological superpower, will chafe against American restrictions on its space and military ambitions. Turkey, having consolidated its neo-Ottoman sphere, will seek to break free from Western dominance. Together, they will form a coalition of the ambitious nations that have risen to regional prominence but remain constrained by the US-led world order. The war begins with a surprise attack, not on cities or military bases, but on America's orbital infrastructure. Hypersonic missiles launched from space platforms will target satellites, while cyber attacks cripple communication networks. For the first time in history, the opening salvos of a global conflict will occur in silence, hundreds of miles above Earth's atmosphere. Military technology in 2080 will render traditional warfare obsolete. Autonomous drone swarms will engage in lightning-fast dogfights in low Earth orbit. AI-powered strategic systems will make decisions at speeds no human commander could match. The US will leverage its decades of space dominance, while the Japan-Turkey alliance will rely on technological innovation and asymmetric tactics. After initial setbacks, America's deep reserves of resources and institutional resilience will prove decisive. The war will end not with a treaty, but with the collapse of the challenger's orbital networks, and with it, their ability to project power. The aftermath will see space militarized permanently, with the US establishing a new framework of control over Earth's orbital lanes. This conflict will redefine power for the 22nd century. Just as the world wars of the 20th century determined the fate of terrestrial empires, the war of the 2080s will decide who governs mankind's expansion beyond Earth. The result will reinforce a fundamental truth: geography still dictates destiny, it just extends much higher now. The ultimate irony? This war will ensure American dominance lasts another 100 years, precisely because it will be fought in a domain where the US has already staked its claim. The next challenge won't come from rivals on Earth, but from the consequences of winning this final, decisive conflict. Chapter 5: The Century of America. The most controversial claim in the next 100 years is not about space wars or rising powers, it's Friedman's assertion that the 21st century will be, like the 20th, fundamentally an American century. While conventional wisdom predicts America's inevitable decline, Friedman argues the US is uniquely positioned to dominate through 2100 and beyond. 3 unconquerable advantages ensure this outcome. First, geography as permanent armor. The United States enjoys what historian Alfred Thayer Mahan called the greatest strategic endowment any nation has ever possessed. Vast oceans east and west, weak neighbors north and south, and a continent-spanning territory rich in resources and farmland. Unlike China, Russia, or Europe, America faces no existential threats on its borders, allowing it to project power abroad without fear of invasion. Second, demographics as destiny. While competitors face demographic collapse, China, aging crises, Europe, or stagnation, Japan, America's combination of immigration and fertility rates ensures population growth. This isn't about culture or ideology, it's simple math. By 2050, the US will be the only major power with a growing workforce supporting retirees rather than the reverse. Third, chaos as competitive advantage. America's apparent dysfunction, political divisions, social upheavals, institutional crises, actually demonstrates the system's resilience. Unlike rigid authoritarian models or fragile democracies elsewhere, the US has an unparalleled capacity to absorb shocks, reinvent itself, and emerge stronger. The Civil War, Great Depression, and 1960s upheavals didn't destroy America, they transformed it into something more powerful. The challenges are real but misunderstood. China's rise will peak then falter under demographic and geographic constraints. Europe's unification project will unravel under nationalist pressures. New powers like Turkey and Poland will emerge but lack capacity to displace the US system. Even the space war of the 2080s will reinforce rather than undermine American dominance. Ultimately, Friedman's vision suggests America isn't just another empire in the historical cycle of rise and fall. The combination of geography, demography, and political plasticity may have created something unprecedented, a superpower capable of evolving indefinitely. The 21st century won't be post-American, it will be the century when America's model becomes the irreversible template for global power. This leads to the final question: if Friedman is right, what does this mean for how we understand national power in an age of AI, climate change, and space colonization? The answer may lie not in predicting specific events, but in recognizing the deeper patterns that make some nations eternally resilient while others rise only to inevitably fall. Chapter 6: Criticisms and Reality Check. For all its bold insights, the next 100 years has drawn significant criticism from experts across the political spectrum. While Friedman's geopolitical framework offers compelling patterns, several key objections deserve examination. The limits of determinism. Critics argue Friedman overstates geographic and demographic determinism. Human agency, technological breakthroughs, and unpredictable events, like pandemics or scientific revolutions, can override structural trends. The rise of renewable energy, for example, could negate Russia's energy leverage faster than predicted. Similarly, artificial intelligence might disrupt traditional power calculations in ways Friedman's 2009 analysis couldn't anticipate. The China Miscalculation? Friedman's dismissal of China's rise appears increasingly questionable. While demographic challenges are real, China's centralized system has proven adept at long-term planning and technological leapfrogging. Its Belt and Road Initiative and AI advancements suggest it may circumvent geographic constraints through economic and digital dominance rather than military expansion. The missing climate factor. Perhaps the most glaring omission is climate change, which barely features in Friedman's analysis. Rising sea levels, mass migrations, and resource wars could radically alter the geopolitical chessboard. America's geographic advantages matter less if Miami is underwater or the Midwest becomes a dust bowl. The space war speculation. Many analysts view the 2080 space conflict scenario as more science fiction than serious forecasting. Current space militarization trends suggest more plausible outcomes, a slow-motion arms race in orbit rather than a sudden, dramatic war. The economics of space may prove more important than its military dimensions. What endures? The method, not the predictions. The book's greatest value lies not in its specific forecasts, many of which will inevitably prove wrong, but in its framework for thinking about power. Friedman teaches us to 1. Look beyond headlines to structural forces. 2. Question conventional wisdom about inevitable rises and falls. 3. Recognize how geography silently shapes history. 4. Think in multi-generational timeframes. The test of Friedman's work won't be whether every prediction comes true, but whether his geopolitical lens helps us see the deeper currents beneath the chaos of events. As the 21st century unfolds, this may be his most enduring contribution. Not a crystal ball, but a compass for navigating an uncertain future. This leads us to the final question: if even half of Friedman's vision proves accurate, what does that mean for how nations, businesses, and individuals should prepare for the coming decades? The answer may determine who thrives in the century ahead, and who becomes a footnote in history. Chapter 7: Navigating the Next Century. Let me share with you what Friedman's predictions really mean for our future, not just for nations and armies, but for people like you and me living through these changes. Imagine it's 2040. You're looking at job listings, and the hottest opportunities aren't in Silicon Valley anymore, they're in orbital logistics and AI defense systems. Countries are scrambling for workers who understand space-based infrastructure. This isn't science fiction, it's the logical next step in Friedman's geopolitical chessboard. Here's what this means for us. First, where you live matters more than ever. As climate change reshapes the planet, the American Midwest and Canada's southern regions are becoming the new hotspots, quite literally. Smart families are already thinking about this, quietly investing in property that will be valuable in 30 years, not just next year. Your career path needs this same long-term thinking. The fields that will thrive align perfectly with Friedman's power shifts. Space-related engineering. Cybersecurity for aging populations. Automation specialists. Demographic analysts. But here's the twist: the most successful people won't just have technical skills. They'll maintain connections across the rising powers. Maybe you have family in Poland, or do business with Turkish partners. These cross-border ties will become incredibly valuable as new regional powers emerge. Governments are already acting on these trends, whether we notice or not. When you hear about new Space Force initiatives or changes to immigration policy, these aren't random decisions. They're moves in the century-long game Friedman mapped out. The unsettling truth: many of our current worries, daily political dramas, stock market swings, even regional conflicts, are just surface waves on this much deeper current. The real forces shaping our lives are the slow-moving tides of demography, geography, and technology that Friedman identified. So here's my question to you: when you look at your children's future, or your retirement plans, are you thinking in terms of next year's trends, or the tectonic shifts that will define the next 50 years? Because understanding these underlying forces might be the most practical skill of all. The future isn't some distant abstraction. It's being built today by the choices we make, where we live, what we learn, how we connect. Friedman gave us the map. Now it's up to us to navigate the terrain. What will you do differently tomorrow, knowing how the pieces are likely to fall? Chapter 8: The Human Equation, Living in Friedman's World. Let me tell you what nobody's discussing about this future we're barreling toward. It's not just about which nations rise or fall, it's about how ordinary people will need to adapt to survive and thrive in this new world order. The uncomfortable truth: our grandparents' roadmap to success is obsolete. The stable careers, the predictable retirement paths, the idea that your nationality alone would guarantee security, all of that is crumbling. Here's what's coming instead. 1. The end of permanent allegiance. Your passport will become like a diversified investment portfolio. Smart families are already securing second citizenships in rising powers like Poland and Turkey, not as escape plans but as strategic options. Dual loyalty won't be treason, it'll be common sense. 2. The skills that will actually matter. Forget learn to code. The real valuable skills will be crisis navigation, physical and digital. Cross-cultural mediation. Applied geopolitics, yes, this will be a vocational skill. The best schools won't teach you answers, they'll teach you how to read shifting power dynamics in real time. 3. The new class divide. It won't be rich vs poor, but those who understand the system's rules. Those stuck playing last century's game. The wealthy are already hiring geopolitical concierges to advise where to buy property, educate children, and store wealth based on Friedman-esque projections. Here's what keeps me up at night: most people won't see these changes coming until it's too late. They'll keep arguing about yesterday's politics while the ground shifts beneath them. The winners will be those who recognize these patterns early and position themselves accordingly. The most valuable asset in the 21st century? Not money. Not even data. It's the ability to see several moves ahead on Friedman's chessboard, and the courage to act on that knowledge before the crowd catches on. So I have to ask, when you look at your life through this lens, what needs to change today to secure your place in tomorrow's world? Because the future isn't coming, it's already here, just unevenly distributed. Chapter 9: When Predictions Collide with Reality. We've followed Friedman's roadmap across decades and continents, but here's what happens when theory smashes into the messy reality of human civilization. Because the most fascinating part of any forecast isn't what the prophet got right, it's where reality stubbornly refused to follow the script. The Great Acceleration. Friedman assumed change would unfold at geopolitical speed, the slow grind of demographics and geography. But technology has other plans. AI development outpacing all projections. Climate disruptions arriving decades early. Social media rewriting national identities in real time. These accelerations are compressing Friedman's century-long timeline into decades. The space war scenario might arrive by 2060. Poland's rise? Already visible in today's defense spending. The Black Swans nobody saw coming. 3 curveballs Friedman's model couldn't anticipate. 1. The AI wildcard. When artificial general intelligence emerges, it won't care about geography or demographics. 2. The mutation factor. Next-gen pandemics that target specific ethnic genotypes could rewrite demographic projections overnight. 3. The consciousness revolution. What happens when neurotechnology lets masses opt out of national identities entirely? The new rules of the game. 1. The paradox of prediction. The more accurate a forecast becomes, the faster it inspires actions that make it obsolete. See how Friedman's Ukraine prediction may have influenced Putin's actual timing. 2. The end of geography. Cyber warfare and drone tech are undermining the defensive advantage of oceans and mountains that Friedman considered permanent. 3. The attention economy goes geopolitical. TikTok wars and meme-driven insurgencies prove information now flows faster than armies can mobilize. Here's the uncomfortable truth: we're all test subjects in the greatest stress test of geopolitical theory ever conducted. Friedman gave us the best map we have, but the territory keeps changing beneath our feet. The question isn't whether his predictions will come true. It's whether we're nimble enough to adapt when they do, and humble enough to pivot when they don't. Because in this century more than any other, the future belongs not to those who can predict it perfectly, but to those who can dance with its surprises. Chapter 10: The Enduring Currents of History. As we come to the end of this journey through Friedman's vision of the next century, I find myself reflecting not just on the predictions themselves, but on the deeper truths that underlie them. Because beyond the specific forecasts about which nations will rise or fall, there's a more profound lesson about how to navigate an uncertain future. Let me share what I've come to understand. The world changes in ways that often surprise us, but it does so within certain boundaries that have held true for centuries. Geography might seem less important in our digital age, yet those physical realities, the location of waterways, the fertility of land, the defensibility of borders, continue to shape destinies in ways no technology has yet overcome. I think about demographics not as dry statistics, but as the slow-moving tides of human existence. Every society goes through seasons of growth and aging, of energy and decline. The most successful nations and individuals are those who recognize which season they're in and plan accordingly. There's wisdom in planting trees when you're young that you'll never sit under. What strikes me most is the paradox of resilience. The systems that endure aren't the strongest or most rigid, but those that can bend without breaking. America's chaotic democracy, with all its flaws, has proven more durable than countless authoritarian regimes because it contains the seeds of its own renewal. There's a lesson there for our personal lives too. The importance of building in flexibility, of leaving room to adapt when circumstances change. Technology keeps rewriting the rules, but never quite as completely as we expect. Every breakthrough solves old problems while creating new ones, and the advantage always shifts to those who can learn fastest rather than those who innovate first. The real skill isn't predicting the next big thing, but developing the capacity to understand and adopt it when it arrives. And perhaps most importantly, I've come to see the power of the stories we tell ourselves. Nations that maintain compelling narratives about their purpose and destiny can weather astonishing challenges. For individuals too, the story we believe about where history is heading shapes the choices we make today, whether we prepare for the long term or live only for the present. As I look ahead, I don't pretend to know exactly how the next 100 years will unfold. But I've learned to watch for the deeper currents beneath the surface turbulence, the slow but powerful forces of geography, demography, and human nature that will shape our collective future. The specifics may surprise us, but the broad contours are more knowable than we might think. So rather than trying to predict every twist and turn, I'm focusing on understanding these enduring patterns. Because in the end, the best preparation for tomorrow isn't having a detailed map of the future, but developing the wisdom to read the signs as they emerge. The next century will be what we make of it, and now, perhaps, we're a little better equipped to meet it.